I chose the global issue of human trafficking, which is the hidden crime that is affecting the globe. What is human trafficking? The Department of Homeland Security defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. It can happen in any community, and victims can be any age, race, gender, or nationality. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, or false promises of well-paying jobs or romantic relationships to lure victims into trafficking situations. Here are some facts that I feel like were the most important from the research I did all semester. First, it's important to know there are 3 types of trafficking: labor, sexual, and organ. It will really take combined efforts from the economic, public, and legal sectors to come about change. Again, like it mentioned in the definition, manipulation is the biggest weapon used by traffickers, so the promise of money or a new home or a better life. And that is because a key trait of victims is their vulnerability. Trafficking is a billion-dollar industry. Some argue that it brings in $150 billion a year. It's important to know it does not just happen in illicit industries, but also legal. And lastly, human trafficking happens in every country, not just developing countries. There are so many myths and misunderstandings when it comes to human trafficking, but you will find the statistics startling. 20 to 40 million people are estimated to be victims of human trafficking globally. And you might be wondering why there is such a wide range in the number. The number of victims is hard to identify due to the nature of the crime and the vulnerability of victims. Here are some more statistics and breakdown from the International Labor Organization. 71% of victims are female, 29% are male. Of the children who are victims, 7% are trafficking victims are forced into marriage, and 21% of victims are used for sexual exploitation. 75% are 18 or older, and 25% are under 18. And 64% are in forced labor, 19% are sexually exploited, and 16% are forced into labor by state authorities. Here's a closer look at how human trafficking affects the United States. 50,000 humans become human trafficking victims in the U.S. each year. In 2018, the Polaris Project, a nonprofit, identified 23,078 survivors and reported 10,949 cases of trafficking in the U.S. alone. North Carolina is ranked among the top 10 states for human trafficking, and Charlotte is the #1 city in the state for the crime. More than 1,700 girls are trafficked in North Carolina each year, and 2,200 children in North Carolina are considered homeless. And the reason this is important is because statistics show 1 in 3 will be picked up by a pimp and sold within the first 48 hours of becoming homeless. Current policy for the issue. A lot of the ways that people work with human trafficking is through nonprofits and state programs. Here's just some that I worked with throughout the semester. Polaris Project is a national and global initiative to end trafficking. What's unique about their initiative and their project is they put the interests of the victims and their survivors at the center, always working for the good of them. And they provide 24/7 support and reporting services. Lily Pad Haven, Inc. provides housing and healing services for victims of trafficking in Charlotte, North Carolina, mostly female. Present Age Ministries is a local ministry in Concord, North Carolina. I actually, for one of my interviews, sat down with Abby Cashin, who has spent a lot of time volunteering with them, and she informed me that their mission is to rebuild trust, restore hope, and redefine love for survivors of sexual abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. And lastly, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Human Trafficking Task Force, which is a local coalition of service providers, law enforcement, and prosecutors working to fight human trafficking, provides healing and restoration along with justice for victims and their families, working hard to discover and prosecute traffickers. United States laws and regulations are the Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2013, which was actually the Fourth Amendment to the Act. It ensures that U.S. citizens do not purchase products made by victims of human trafficking, helps prevent child marriages, provides emergency response within the State Department after disasters, and forms a connection with state and local law enforcement to ease and help charging and prosecuting traffickers. There's also the PROTECT Act, which created enhanced penalties for individuals engaging in sex tourism with children within the US and other countries. It helps with the Amber Alert system to alert the public of missing, exploited, and abducted children, and gives for alternative housing for child victims of sexual assault. And then lastly, really tariffs and trade regulation actually help with human trafficking because they help put in place and monitor trade and transport of goods overseas, because often traffickers move their victims over state lines or from one country to another. And then some global laws and regulations is the International Justice Mission, which works to abolish modern slavery, also known as forced labor. And their goals are really to rescue slaves, and they work really closely with local authorities to prosecute slave owners, and they want to end slavery for good. And then the United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking, which is probably the largest initiative ever. It was established in 2017 to provide resources to combat and prevent trafficking. They work to rescue victims and provide support, and they just want to educate all countries and on a government level of the crime. And they conducted the largest global report that collected data from 155 countries in 2018. So what can we do globally and locally? There has to be a call to action. After all of my research, I think an emphasis on education is what's missing in our current policy. We have to work together across all sectors to bring awareness and education on the crime of human trafficking. Much of the current policy doesn't focus on educating individuals on signifiers of victims and the true nature of the crime while they're working to put traffickers away and to rescue victims. They aren't working from a place of prevention, but more to stop it. But I think if you come at it from an education perspective, you could prevent it for the future. So I would say you could do this through global and local marketing campaigns. And in order to do that, you have to provide funding for education and schooling on a local and national level. But really, after all of the research I did all semester, I think I learned that change starts with me and with you, and we have to hold each other accountable to educating ourselves on such a serious crime, and learning about the ways that victims can be identified, and educating individuals so that they have the skills and tools and they feel enabled to not find themselves in situations where they may be trafficked. So thank you for taking the time to learn about human trafficking with me, and I enjoyed the semester.